Hello, everyone. You're listening to The Right Side of Gaming. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit more about the Red List, as well as how I think we might have a better way to put out biased games and products. I'm actually going to be using Christian products as an example. But don't worry, I'm not going to be preaching to anyone. I'm just going to be talking about sort of how they do things. Now, to start with, I know when I did the original Red List video, I was looking at the forum. Someone had also posted a link to the Google Doc that they were using. But when I went to look at it, it was completely gone. I think what had happened was they had left the Google Doc open where other people could edit it. And a lot of people that disagreed with their politics were going in and adding things to the list, or even adding themselves to the list. Which is totally unfair because I have yet to make anyway. But they decided that they needed to shut that down because you couldn't have people, I guess, from the other side messing with it. So they took that one down. And I guess I missed that somewhere in there that they had another one up, and they've been using that one and making edits to it. They make it a little bit clearer as to why they're doing this and what each category is supposed to represent. So I want to make sure that you know that that's out there, that maybe that might clear things up a little bit if anyone still has any issues or doesn't understand it. And I also want to make sure that I have that link available for you guys. I'll put it in the description below, so if you want to see the document that they're actually going to be editing, it'll be right there. Now they go in a little bit more detail as to why they're doing this. They've got a foreword where they give some more information. They've got your actual list, and then at the very end, there's a frequently asked questions with a little bit more info. In the foreword and the frequently asked questions, they talk about how they were a little disillusioned. They bought books for D&D specifically, I think is the example that they used. And they got really into it, and then they found out that Wizards was really pushing their politics, and it kind of put them off because they felt like they didn't get what they were expecting. And they looked at Wizards' behavior, and they thought, a lot of the behavior from the company was toxic or unwelcoming, especially to people with different ideologies. And they started looking around for other companies that maybe might have similar products that they could buy. And they realized that that wasn't unique, that there are other companies out there in the tabletop RPG sphere that are also toxic or unwelcoming to people that have different beliefs. In fact, he started talking about a lot of the bad behaviors that some of these companies were doing, like harassing people, or doxing them, or trying to get competitors pulled off of shelves, or maybe being anti-consumer, at least what they're calling anti-consumer. And one of the ones that they really key in on was a phrase that I guess a lot of companies are saying these days. If you don't like our politics, don't buy our games. And I think that was a big part for the list. And they make it very clear that this is supposed to be a consumer guide, not a blacklist. You're supposed to be able to go in and pick what you like or make a decision based on it. You don't have to just automatically, buy from green, ignore red. You can go in and at least know you have like a heads up. This is a company you might want to look into if it's something that bothers you. And they make it a point to say that in both the foreword and the frequently asked questions. That it's just a guide, and that you are not supposed to harass the people you don't agree with. I think that's something that's worth mentioning because a lot of times people will look at this, or just anything that gets posted on the internet. It's like, oh, there's this person I don't like. Let's go send them all sorts of hate messages on Twitter. Let's, whatever it is people do these days. There's a lot of it out there. They also make a point in the frequently asked questions that it's not for companies that are obviously bad, or products that are obviously bad. Some games are obviously partisan or racist, to the point that no one can mistake it for anything else. It's not like you're gonna buy this product thinking it's fluffy bunnies and then no. Like, some games are absolutely horrible. They use Fatal as one of their examples. If you're not familiar with it, it is beyond horrible. I couldn't tell you half the stuff that's really messed up in this game without getting kicked off of YouTube, but I think one of the most famous examples is a damage table that I can't even explain without being incredibly inappropriate. Okay, this is absolutely a bad game. It's very racist. Like, it's one of those things where you might look through it just to see how horrible it is, and there's a lot there that I think would offend a lot of people. Then they go through, and in both the forward and in like the little introduction to each list itself, it kind of gives a little bit better example of what they're talking about for each category. So green, it's supposed to be companies that were neutral, that are pro free speech, companies that are genuinely friendly regardless of their political persuasion. These are companies that aren't going to try to kick you out of the community just because you don't agree with them, or they just don't do anything political, whatever. In fact, they also say that they don't go into that anti-consumer behavior, which again I think is what they're calling the "don't buy our product if you don't like it" type of deal, behavior that would be against general consumers. So these are your non-political, or they just don't care and everyone is welcome. You have yellow, which is maybe they've engaged in some questionable practices, or maybe they've made some questionable statements, but they haven't made a habit out of it. Or maybe when they did do it, it was unintentional, or it was well-intentioned, but they sort of sent the wrong message. Maybe they've taken a political stance that alienated some customers, or they might have preached a little bit on their products, where they're not trying to harm or do anything bad towards their consumers. Like, they might have their beliefs, but they're not necessarily trying to push you out, if that makes sense. And then red is the ones that they're saying are absolutely bad actors. They've caused harm to others. They've been hostile to people that believe differently than they do. They've engaged in that anti-consumer behavior, so your "don't buy it" or "let's get your product pulled" type of stuff. They've had deceptive business practices. They've interfered with others. Again, I'm not necessarily certain how much of that is well researched, because that's some serious allegations. They may have gotten really political and alienated a lot of their customers, or they're just openly racist or sexist. And these days, that can be towards all kinds of groups. Some, I think, are more socially acceptable to be racist or sexist against than others, but that's a separate issue. But you get the idea that there's this gradient here. They're either not political or everyone is good, green. You're a little political, but you'll still kind of accepting of everyone, yellow. Or you're really political and you just hate your customers or your community that are not like you, and that's when we get into red. I think a lot of that is really focused on the community and acceptance part of that. I've seen people all over the forum discussion, which again, don't go to unless you're ready for it, because a lot of stuff in there isn't always nice or what I would necessarily deem safe for work from both sides. But there's been a lot of focus on not necessarily just what they do as business practices, but how they treat the community and those that disagree with them. So I was trying to think of a way of how you could be sort of biased or political or whatever, and do it appropriately. Okay, and the first thing that I came up with would be like Christian products. Okay, and hear me out, because I promise it makes more sense, at least in my mind, than maybe it would to other people. Because I know that, well, and religion is a touchy topic for a lot of people. Again, so is politics. And I realize it's not necessarily the same thing. A lot of times, they can be kind of linked. A lot of your religious companies lean right politically. A lot of your really hard left progressives tend to be anti-religion or anti-specific religions. But I think it's safe to say that they do have a specific ideology that they are trying to push. I think we can all agree on that. And there are religious companies and games that they put out. Like, I looked up a couple that I could think of just off the top of my head. I know I've mentioned it on the channel before. I bought redemption cards like a decade or two ago. I forget how far. And I was surprised that it's still a thing. Like, they are still making and selling products. They had a tournament last year, and I'm like, what? I expected it to just completely fall off the face of the planet like a decade ago or something, but I guess it's still going, which I'm impressed. I'll be honest. And then I know that I saw this game recently. I couldn't say anything about it. I mean, Redemption is, or at least it was, I don't know how much it's changed, but it was a really bad Magic the Gathering ripoff. And I mean early Magic, when Magic didn't have really good idea of what it wanted to do or how to do things. So that tells you how well made Redemption was. Deliverance, again, it was just one of the things that had come across my news feed or timeline or whatever. And it was like, oh, hey, cool, Christian board game. Because I guess with a lot of emphasis these days on board games and sort of new and interesting development where it's, you get your Settlers of Catan and everything's not just Monopoly type of deals. I guess religious companies are finding ways to sort of expand and hopefully make a better product. If nothing else, it looks kind of cool. But you have these religious games. And we've had religious products for decades that we can point to outside of games. You have your religious movies, your religious music, your religious books. And all of them are obviously targeting a specific group. Like, it's like, okay, these are obviously made for Christians or people who want to know more about Christianity, depending on what it is and all that stuff. But at least they make it available to everyone, because it's like, okay, we have this ideology, but we want everyone to believe it. It's clearly set apart. Like, if you want to buy a Christian CD, and I have a ton of them, I have to go to either a Christian store where obviously they're going to have that specific ideology, or I have to go to a specific section in Walmart. I have to go to the stuff that's clearly marked religious. Okay? If I want to go and get a Christian book, I have to go to the bookstore and go to the part that says religious. Like, they have a specific ideology, they're targeting a specific crowd, and it's very obvious to everyone that this is the ideology that's pushing. It's not going to be a surprise to anyone, or it probably shouldn't be. But it's still something that at least everyone is welcome to buy. They're not saying, you don't believe what we believe, don't buy our books. It's like, no, it's like, if they want people to believe them, like, yeah, no, we'll actually give out free Bibles and whatnot. Okay? And there's obviously stuff that they do that they try to get it more into the mainstream or for other people to see or to hear. But it's not always either pushing an ideology, or they try to make it where it's like welcoming for everyone. Because I know some of the bands I like. I think Thousand Foot Crutch got used by the NFL, one of their songs. I know Skillet has had one of their songs used by the WWE. And if people aren't familiar with these, or if you're from other countries, NFL is football. That's American football, not what we call soccer. And WWE is wrestling, not Olympic wrestling, more the let's smack people with chairs wrestling. So these are like major sporting events that use Christian music or music by Christian artists. Okay. And again, it's one of those things where maybe they don't use the stuff that is overtly religious, or they don't use the parts of that is, but it's still stuff that's generally speaking aimed at a specific audience. The audience knows what it is. It's available to others. But everyone is going to be like, yeah, that's going to be something I either agree with or don't agree with, or I don't agree with it, but I want to know more. Okay. I want to compare that to products where they're putting it out for everyone. Let's use Wizards of the Coast because that's what our author used of our list. They put it out for everyone. It's like, this is for everyone, but they're pushing a specific agenda. Like if I go onto Wizards of the Coast, if I didn't know anything about them, I would think this is just a regular product. I wouldn't know that this is specifically a very political product. So I can understand why people get surprised. It's like, oh, I wanted to buy what I thought was a simple, fun trading card game, and I got leftist politics. No, it's the exact opposite. You instead of making it clear what it is, but still having it available to everyone, you're trying to make it available to everyone while hiding what it really is. And that's, I think, where you get the issues. People feel surprised, like I wouldn't have bought this. I wouldn't have spent my money on this if I knew what it was. Maybe I wouldn't have gotten so invested in it in terms of time or emotion or whatever if I knew that this is what it was. I feel like I was lied to. And even if it's, not necessarily their fault, I think just that feeling that you have been deceived is what really upsets a lot of people. And I think that's something that really comes across when you're reading our Red List guy's story about about how he bought these books and then it wasn't what he expected. He got into this something. He was buying all these books. His group was buying them. They were all having fun with this, but it just became increasingly political. Okay, it feels like Wizards of the Coast kind of hit the ball on that one. And then at the very opposite end, you have people that aren't necessarily trying to make it available to everyone, but they're not really hiding it either. We have a recent post by Evil Hat Productions that you may have seen saying that there's no such thing as a political game and then put forth a lot of their politics. Okay, so they're clearly political, but they're also trying to keep people from playing their product. Okay? And that's going to really scare a lot of people off because they're saying, this isn't for you. We don't need your money, which in general is typically a bad thing for business unless you're trying to sort of play to your base and get more of them to buy it. I assume this was a calculated thing on their part. It's like, oh, well, people that disagree with our politics probably aren't going to buy it. But if we really play up this angle, the people that do agree with us might be more likely to buy it. And like that's absolutely a possibility. But they're being very upfront and maybe a little too political. Like we go through their posts, and I think we can agree that everyone should be shown at least some minimum of respect. That's just what you do in society. You have to at least treat others with respect. Doesn't necessarily mean that you feel respect for them, but you at least treat them with respect. It's like, I don't respect what you do or what your beliefs are, maybe, but I will at least be polite and respectful when I interact with you. Or maybe you respect people, but you don't necessarily support them. Okay, because they're asking you to support specific ideologies. And it's like, okay, I might be able to treat the people that support or push those ideologies with respect, but I absolutely do not respect their beliefs. Like, I think a lot of them might be offensive or bigoted or whatever. And honestly, looking at some of these, I can see why people might not necessarily agree with the politics behind some of those. But they make it pretty clear that if you are not one of these people, they don't want you playing their game, which obviously is just going to upset people that disagree with them. But we see how these two different approaches might get some of it right. You know, again, the Christian products, they make it very clear that it has a specific ideology, but they still try to make it friendly and available and open to everyone. This is the Ghost. It's open to everyone, but we're trying to hide the politics. We want to sneak that in. And if you don't agree with us, that's when we have issues because you're not welcome. Okay? They're open, but they're not welcome. And then Evil Eye Productions, again, they're very clear about their beliefs, but they don't want you playing your game if you're not like them. You have to at least be able to respect the people that disagree with you. You have to make it clear to them that, okay, this is something that may not be for you, but you're still welcome to it. But we want to make it clear this isn't for you. And I feel like if we had more of that from some of these red list companies, if they were just willing to say, okay, you know what, we have these beliefs that we really want to push, and they may not be for you, but we're not going to take it out on you. We're not going to say you're not welcome to our games. We're not going to say you're a bad person or whatever. If they could just treat the people they disagreed with respect, if they were open and honest about what they were doing and what their beliefs were and what their game was built on, I think we wouldn't have a lot of these issues. I think people wouldn't feel so upset. I think people, even if they disagreed, might be more willing to buy their products. It's just we've got to the point where you have to sort of virtue signal some of this stuff. You have to say certain things to sort of appease the online mob, and if you don't, well, then they come for you and they try to cancel your company. So to some extent, I can understand why they might say some things we don't agree with, but to others, it's that excuse only goes so far. At this point, I think a lot of them, especially the ones that are on this sort of red list portion, probably genuinely believe or represent that type of view. Okay, that if you disagree with them, then you're a bad person and they don't want you playing their games. So hopefully that gives you guys a little bit to think on. And if we do find some companies that are conservative or right-leaning or just anti-woke or whatever, I would hope that they would, again, be acting in a productive manner and saying, okay, you know what, this is our ideology. We are conservative. We are anti-woke. We are whatever. And that's who we're targeting this game at. So it might offend some people, but you're still welcome to play it. We don't have a problem with you specifically. We're not saying that you're a bad person. We're just saying we disagree with your beliefs, and this is targeted towards people that agree with us. I think that's a much healthier way to go, and I really wish some of these companies would do that, because a lot of them put out some really good products otherwise, I'll admit. But again, I think I'm rambling again and started getting off topic. I really was trying to wrap this up. So if you guys have any comments, if you want to leave a like, subscribe, that'd be great. I think there's a lot of room for us to discuss some of the stuff still. And if you don't want to, that's okay too. I understand. Either way, I hope you have an awesome day, and I will catch you next time.